Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rings and Lanes podcast. I am your host, Rico Muhammad. I will be joined here shortly by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. We are saying good morning because once again, we are pre-recording today's show. So if you would do us a huge favor, please like, share, and subscribe to the show. It helps us out, helps push the video out to a broader audience. Please comment. We welcome all your comments, suggestions, things of that nature. We try to go through and check all those things and see different ways that we may be able to improve the show as well. And so with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and welcome in my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good morning, Chuck. How are you?
We're doing great. How are you?
I really cannot complain. Not bad it's a beautiful sunny Sunday morning here down in the South. So it looks like the sun is out up your way as well.
Yeah, you know what? We've had last night the skies opened up, and my gosh, we got more rain in probably about an hour than we've had in a while, and it drizzled a bit, and then drizzled again this morning a little. But now we're gonna have a beautiful Sunday, and it's going to be about 90 degrees up here. So yeah, which is good. You know what? We get 8 weeks of summer if we're lucky.
we kind of dread when we get those afternoon showers or whatever, because then when the sun comes back out with a vengeance, it just kind of makes the whole place feel like a microwave. It just intensifies the heat with the humidity.
Well, you know, when they talk about the hot, sticky South, they know what they're talking about. It's hot and it's sticky and it's South.
Absolutely. Well, today we thought it might be a good opportunity. I was telling you before we came on, trucking is kind of in a very peculiar situation. One that we probably, I'm not going to say we haven't seen, but it just hasn't been so prolonged and so uncertain as it has been in years past. I get advice from people asking about going into the trucking industry, and I'm telling everybody I can that right now is probably not the best time to be starting a trucking company.
No, you know, it's funny you say that, because quite often you'll hear people say, you know, the best time to get into anything is in a down cycle.
Right.
Because, of course, you can buy your equipment cheap. But this one would not make any sense, because all you would be doing is you would go and you'd buy a truck and you'd go looking for work, and you might find work, but the work is going to pay you a lot less than your cost, especially as a new entrant into the industry. So I would stay as clear from it as I could if you aren't in the industry right now as an owner operator or as a fleet operator. If you can get a job as a driver, I do still think that there are some great opportunities out there, in spite of everything, for people to work as truck drivers working for other people, because there's still a need for companies. A lot of private carriers, a lot of small fleets, a lot of large fleets need good drivers.
Yeah, and here's the caveat: like we're seeing a lot of major companies. Matter of fact, I ran across a story yesterday talking about the drivers out in, I think it was Arizona, that are being laid off from Kroger. They're Teamsters drivers. I forget the name of the company that they actually contracted with. They had just signed a 3-year contract, but they're canceling the contract early and turning most of their transportation needs over to Night Swift, or Swift Night, or however you pronounce it. But like we were saying, if someone's interested in even the best laid plans, if you decide that I'm going to jump into the trucking industry, and if you've got a customer base, that may be able to help insulate you a little bit. But right now, even with a solid contract or a customer base, there's no guarantees.
No,
of course, there's no guarantees in anything, but it's really the wild, wild west right now.
Rico, I've been in this business altogether since 1974, and I've actually seen two contracts since 1974 that were lock solid. Okay, the rest of them, there's lots of wiggle room, especially for the customer to get out. They're always written that way, um, which is really sad because you think the carrier, he or she is the one that goes out and takes all this risk upon their shoulders of going out and buying trucks and trailers and equipment to facilitate a new customer's need in order to fulfill a contract. And then very shortly after, and I've seen it several times in my life, it's happened to me, where all of a sudden you're running this contract. Sometimes you don't even, you get the contract, but you haven't even put the truck in yet. And they say, oh no, we found somebody 10 cents cheaper. Get out of here. You know,
And yeah, and on top of that, even with like I was saying, even with all those things in your favor, with the rising cost of everything that is associated with the business, and I don't want to make this episode sound like a doom and gloom type of episode. That's not like the intention here. The intention here is just to inform people that may be contemplating. Uh, a hint to the wise should be sufficient. You know, that's something that my grandfather always told me. And if there are people that are doing things that you're interested or thinking about doing, and if they're telling you from their experience that it may not be all peaches and cream, it may not be all roses, you know, you might want to take a listen to that and take that under advisement. Um, the But I was saying with the cost associated with everything, excuse me, rising cost of insurance,
yeah.
rising maintenance costs, rising cost of parts. It just the list of things go on and on and on. And if you are relegated to not, if you don't have a contract, for the most part, most people, small carriers that jump into the industry, very few. I'm not saying all of them. I don't want to hit everybody with a broad brush, but very few have dedicated customers. Most rely on the spot market. And
Yeah.
if you're relying on the spot market right now, the rates on the spot market, I'm not saying that you can't find good rates, but they are harder and more difficult to come by, and you have to really, really be running a really tight ship in order for that to be, in order for that model to stay afloat.
Rico, I've said this on the show before, and I'm going to say it again just for new listeners that haven't heard my take on the spot market in these type of times. The spot market reminds me of a river, and you have 500 men or women and men standing at that river with nets, and they're all looking for a fish. And somebody else fish, and there's a fish in the river, and there's 500 people with nets trying to catch that one fish.
Well, and I'm not sure how. I worked the spot market a good bit, and I'm not sure things have changed dramatically from when we very first started doing these
Yeah,
shows.
about 8 years ago. My God. Yeah.
I remember it used to be a time where it was fine. You could post your truck, and you could keep your truck posted. And sometimes posting your truck here in Atlanta is a really good market. You post your truck, I'll get phone calls. But if I'm in a different market and I happen to post my truck, nothing. The phone doesn't ring.
No,
The
because
phone
you,
doesn't. You better be on the, when you see something that looks like an opportunity, you better get the dialing, because the phone is not in these different markets that I've been positioned in other than Atlanta. The phone does not ring. I remember a time where all across the country, if the load to truck ratio was in your favor, man, all you could post your truck and you couldn't even set your phone back down from answering phone calls of how many times that your phone would ring. And I have yet to experience that since I've been dabbling back into the spot market at any point in time, other than Atlanta. Atlanta's kind of been the exception to the rule because we have a pretty good freight base coming out of Atlanta, but
right.
that has not been the case in any other parts of the country that I have been in, and primarily in the southeastern region.
Yeah, no, it's been, it's changed drastically compared to when you and I first started doing this 8 or 10 years ago. It was a totally different landscape. And now what's happened is there, as we both know, there's way too many trucks for very few loads. And with changes in first of all, we've had a lot of changes in the economy on its own, post COVID.
Mhm.
On top of that, we've had changes in administration. um, we've got this tariff thing that's affected things. We've got, there's just people are not spending money the way they were. They're not buying, and they're certainly not spending money at the retail level the way they were. If they're spending money, they're spending money on things like online ordering, whether it's from Amazon or somebody else. That's where they are spending their money, whatever money they have, because it's cheaper.
Yeah, things are shifting, models are shifting, business is shifting. It's definitely, as they say, the common phrase out there. It's a brave new world. So, and we have to. I don't know. We have to try to find out where our services may fit into a niche that may accommodate certain different aspects of how the world is shifting, and being able to accommodate that new shift, that new paradigm shift that is taking place. Um, Reading, our good friend Dean Croak has sent us over an advanced copy of the DAT market update, and I'm taking a look. Starting out with I'm going to start with dry vans. I'm just going
Right.
to read here a little bit from the report. Dry van report indicates for May that there's a cooling in demand for higher truckload services in the USA after a strong March and April. Here are the key points. This index is co-authored by Jason Miller and Yamisi Blumino. I cannot. I'm butchering that name, but I apologize. At Michigan State University, in the estimates for higher truck demand by combination of combining the data for 40 generating industries using a weighted geometric means that the commodity flow survey. So it's showing that there's a decrease of 0.6% from May, but actually, when you combine the data, it goes down to a 1% year over year. So and the decline is linked to weaker production, like you just said, non-metallic mineral products,
Right.
construction wholesaling, reflecting the slowdown in single-family housing. So we're showing dry vans right there. That's showing, and it gives the. I I would see if there probably is a way to get up the. Let's see if I can pull this up. See if I can share the data. But while I'm working on that, just to indicate, Chuck, the information that you were just saying, things have definitely slowed down as far as on the retail part, and it's definitely indicated by the data as well.
Well, right. And, we've even had like housing starts are way low. What happens when somebody buys a new house, or it starts when they're building a house? They've got wood, they've got steel, they've got shingles, they have cement, they have all these things, and all those things take trucks. And then once the house is built, you folks down in Georgia usually supply carpeting for those houses.
Yeah.
And then historically, us folks up in Canada have been supplying softwood for a lot of those houses. Well, Mr. Trump has put he's tripled the tariff or something last night on the Canadian softwood, and the American producers do not have enough softwood to build houses, but they're not building them anyways. So the only houses being built are the ones that are being replaced after natural disasters, which there's been no shortage of. But no new housing or very little is being built in both of our countries. What we've got up here in Canada, I've noticed, is that people have been buying tracts of land and they've been selling it off to a large group around here that just came up, and they call themselves the Argo Group, who I believe Brookfield management is behind, Brookfield Investments, one of their groups, and they're buying all this cheap land. So it's certainly, but nothing's going to happen with that land for probably decades. So it's all just kind of up in the air right now, and the trucks
Yeah,
are moving. And it's funny. You were talking uh, just before about all these costs going up, and they are going up. The only thing that's not going up, first of all, the remuneration for trucking services certainly isn't going up. And the other thing that you could buy a good used truck, very inexpensive right now because there's so many on the market, but the cost of operating that truck is huge. So what you save on that used truck, um, you're going to spend on maintaining it.
yeah. I was trying to see if I could, and I'm not. That's probably something I'm gonna have to tinker around with. I know that there's a way to do it. I wanted to try to be able to get the data up on the screen to kind of share the map of the United States of how the market looks. And of course, if you're familiar with DAT's map, it has different color codes on there to show you where the hot markets are and where everything is. And we're looking at basically this map is totally blue, which indicates cold. We got a cut. There are a few hot pockets right now in certain regions where there is some red. Those markets, I'll read them off really quickly. Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DMV area is showing a little bit of red. This is only for dry van markets right now. Of course, like I was saying, Atlanta, Charlotte market is showing a little hot. We have a little pockets out in Memphis and Arkansas, a little bit in Dallas, Fort Worth, kind of like the major hubs. Everywhere else showing completely blue or yellow.
Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me because, first of all, we have too many trucks. That's the biggest. It still comes down to that. And if you're operating 5 trucks and you're losing money, you're better off to size it down to 1 or 2 trucks. You'll lose less money. I have a good friend of mine. Now, he is a very wealthy man, but he has about 10 trucks and he's parked about 8 of them. And he said to me, I'd rather go broke having my trucks parked against the fence than go broke trying to run them.
Yeah. I tell you what was really interesting.
What's that?
When we had Dean on, I'm kind of going back through the report more, and I'm looking at when we had Dean on the last time, and he made mention of the Ozempic effect.
Yes. It's true though. You know what? You have all these people. It doesn't take much, but between Canada and the United States, we're talking close to 400 million people. And you get a few percent of those people who start consuming less food, and you need less trucks. It goes right down to the bottom. We see cause and effect. We're standing right there. We're witnesses to it all the time.
Oh wow! I didn't realize this. Del Monte filed for declared bankruptcy.
Who did?
Del
Yes.
Monte Foods.
Yes, because here it goes again. People have stopped consuming the amount of canned foods that they did previously. Now, there's 2 reasons for this. Number one, it's health-wise. A lot of people those people that can afford it have said, I'm not going to eat any more canned foods because I hear that there are bad things in it and I want fresh or frozen. I do not want to eat my food out of a can. And then you have those other people that just can't, the other people that really just can't afford canned food. They're depending on food banks, and they're eating pasta,
right?
They're eating dried beans, because that's what they're getting at the food banks. And we never had this when I was growing up, but the working poor,
Yes.
And we have an awful lot of that, and we need to look at that, and I don't think we can pay people $30 an hour to pour coffee, but we have to give people some sort of a living wage.
And this is this, and herein lies the rub. I don't understand. I'm not sure how what the future may hold. Seriously, because we're looking at a lot of things. A lot of people are looking at how automation can replace human. You go to stores now. You got umpteen million self checkouts. You have you go if you go to a fast food restaurant, they have the self serve kiosk.
Yes.
Um, Everything is to replace the entry level worker. Um, and so you have a bunch of people who though now those jobs are no longer available, and
Yeah.
they are not being able to. Which is why I think that so there's the increase in crime is the way that it is because people don't have jobs.
Yes, that's exactly it. And you know those. It was predominantly women that worked at grocery stores at the checkout counters. Now I don't know what it was like. You're from South Carolina and moved to Georgia. I don't know what it was like down there, but up in Canada, those were really good paying jobs 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Really good paying jobs. Those jobs allowed somebody enough money to pay a mortgage.
Well, and not only that, it's coming for. I think that with AI and all this other stuff, we're talking about automation. Of course, that's going to get out the lower tier jobs, but you're starting to see uh, the AI effect take place, and it's going to start coming after a lot of these white collar jobs as well.
It's already started. Everybody was talking about, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, everybody was talking about coding. Do you remember that?
Hmm.
Learn
Right,
how to code. Learn how to code. Rico, you want to get rich? Learn how to code. Get rich quick. And I have a young cousin that left a really good job and went back to school, learned how to code, and by the time she got out of school, there was no job for coding because AI had already taken it over. It happened that quickly.
right.
Uh, I was just reading a story the other night. I'm fascinated by business stories, and I really wanted to get um, the skinny on the fellow that started XPO or
Mhm.
took XPO into what it is. Brad Jacobs, I'm sure you're familiar
Right.
with, and how he changed the logistics and trucking industry, especially logistics, through investing in and trucking and sorting and all this, sorting in warehouses, sorting parcels. How he changed it by investing in robotics because,
Um,
because he and the market loved it. Because instead of having to hire somebody, he would just put the robots in and they did the sorting.
right.
And right now, not far from where I live, like within 10, 12 miles from where I live, there is one dark warehouse that has hardly any people in it. There's no lights. It's all robots. And they're building a second one, and it's a cold storage place. And it's robots that pick and pack.
Wow.
And this thing has to be. This is a now. It is it's a vertical warehouse. Um, it's not it's big, but it's high. It's like it's got to have like 20 floors in it. It's
Right.
incredible what they're able to do. So those are jobs that people aren't working. So that's what's changing everything so quickly.
Yeah. It's kind of going back to what we were talking about. I'm on following up on this report.
Right.
Spot market rates for reefers have fallen for the third straight week in a row, decreasing by 1 cent per mile over and showing an average rate of $1.96 per mile for reefer rates. Um, Even though that this rate is 2 cents per mile higher than last year and slightly above the 2023 rates, but they have for the third straight week we are showing that that reefer rates have declined.
So let's look at that. reefer rates have declined. Now we are right in the middle of produce season. Would you agree?
Right.
Um, they should have not declined. They should have gone up because this is the season. But we have so many reefers available in the market that they can more than amply handle the volume of freight that the customers have. So there's still too many trucks for the market, and that's what's bringing the rate down because they should have shot up.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up on the report as well, we're going into the flatbed segment. They're showing that residential construction permits slumped to a 2-year low, so like we were just talking about earlier. So of course that's having an effect on flatbeds. Load to truck ratio last week for flatbeds, it rose by 4%, but this was due to flatbed load volume remaining mostly flat, still 18% higher than it was last year. But the carrier equipment posting have decreased by 4%. So spot market national, the average spot market rate for flatbeds has been dropping. It dropped by just over a penny, $2.06 per mile.
But
So
but
a little bit of a silver lining to that is that the current rate is 10 cents per mile higher than the same week of 2024 and 4 cents per mile higher than 2023. So there is a little bit of a silver lining there, but whether or not you're going to be able to produce the volume to get out of that to make that translate to your bottom line is another story.
yeah, that's the big thing. It's you know, and I guess some areas are spending money on road work and things like that, which is helping a little bit. I was just talking to a friend of mine last night who lives in Binghamton, New York, and he was saying how much money they're spending on Interstate 81 to route traffic around Syracuse. They're spending $5 billion. I don't know how they're ever going to get that money back. It doesn't make any sense. Syracuse isn't it's certainly not an economic or industrial hub. So I don't know, but they're doing it.
And we were talking a little bit earlier, and I don't know, man. I'm just trying to figure out. Usually during tough times like this, a lot of times people would maybe say, well, spot market may not be doing so tough. I may just go out and jump on and start hauling some containers or whatever. And with everything that's going on, container, like I say, we don't know where the trades are. You're not sure how much of an impact these tariffs are going to have, and I'm not even sure if that's even a safe haven, so to speak, anymore, as far as hauling containers or running rail containers.
Well, the tariffs, what the tariffs are, they're a sales tax.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, Rico, when you were buying clothes for your family, all of a sudden, if you had to buy those same clothes today, you're going to pay like 10 or 20% more because of the tariffs. Depends on where they're made.
And I think the proof of that, what a lot of people is really starting to realize, is that I don't know. We were talking last week. I think cars is the big segment where people are actually seeing that tariff is not being paid by the other countries. They're actually passing that directly back over to the consumer. And I think you can clearly see that with cars, because I mean, now cars have gotten so expensive. It used to be a point in time where you could go out and buy a new car for $25,000. Man, now the entry level for a new car, even at the base level, you're looking at damn near $30,000 for just a basic, nothing, no thrills, no frills, basic transportation.
When I was a kid, and I just got my driver's license at 16. One of my parents' friends had he had an automotive supply company, and he was buying a bare bones pickup truck, 2-door, may have had automatic transmission, but that was it. No radio, even no power windows on. They were basic. They weren't crew cabs or anything. In 1970, those things were $2,500.
I remember at one point in time, it was back in may have been early '80s or whatever. But hell, the Porsche 911 was like a $30,000 car.
Uh, you know how much they are now up in Canada?
Oh, you better 10x that.
Yeah, that's how much they are up in
Yeah,
Canada.
yeah,
Very
and
expensive cars.
yeah, and if you're talking about one of the really fancy models, that GT3, I'm hearing those things are approaching $500,000.
Yeah, these are expensive cars. I was with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking, and he's got it's an older one. It's like a Lincoln SUV, a big one. It's like the Expedition, but it's a Lincoln.
Navigator, yeah.
Yeah, and he said to get that thing loaded now up in Canada. I said it's got to be over $100,000, and he said $168,000. So, $168,000 for a car.
And so this is, is this, are we eating ourselves? Because like I say, we're talking about increased prices, not only in the trucking industry, but we're talking about increased prices of living for every single thing, and wages are not necessarily keeping pace with the cost of living.
Well, they're not. They're not nowhere near, and that's why people can't afford to go to retailers. It's not just convenience, okay?
Right.
Now
Basic necessities.
it is because they can't afford to go to a well, now there are some bright lights, okay? And if I can give anybody out there some ideas of where to look for business, discounters of any type, okay? If you, whether it's through a trucking company, through a broker, if you can find some sort of a discounter like a jobber or somebody, there's a lot of opportunity right now. The banks have every single bank in North America has had a real hard time because a lot of their customers have not met their loan covenants. It started with trucking, believe it or not, and a lot of them lent money to trucking entities, lost money, lent money to, well, Del Monte is a perfect example of a large company you would never expect to have financial problems. So there's a lot of discount merchandise that is surplus, that is from bankruptcies and things like that, stuff for dollar stores, discount stores, things like that. If you're looking for freight, that's where it is. It's those discounters. And if you can line yourself up with a local jobber, a jobber, somebody that buys and sells, look for merchandise jobbers, look for maybe auctions that are selling material, not just vehicles, but at auctions, they sell all sorts of things. What I've done before in my life, in my previous life, I would have a table at an auction sale, at a large auction sale. When a huge company went out of business, I'd make a deal with the auctioneer, and they would let me put a table out and offer transportation services. Maybe you can get some of the auction houses to do that. There's all sorts of things you can do out there, but I would concentrate on serving the discount business because they're the only ones doing it. I wouldn't want to give business to a department store today. I would not want to give them trucks because I think you're going to get burned.
Right.
But a discounter, the Dollar Generals, their sales are strong. All these dollar stores, I know in California, they have the 99-cent store, and there's some of them are just regionalized. There's Harbor Freight. There's all those companies. Those guys are moving a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm, a lot of the bigger companies. You say that a lot of bigger companies are kind of have a foothold, and especially Dollar General. That used to be one of the bigger accounts for. I think at one point in time, U.S. Express, but hell, I think a little bit of everybody's kind of
Yeah, I
like
see. You know
got their
what? I
finger in
see
that pot.
Warner pulling their. I see everybody. It's like Amazon. Everybody.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't know what your experience has been. Have you hauled any loads for Amazon?
I have not. I at one point in time I went through the process of getting set up with Amazon. The rates that and maybe at the time I might have been on my high horse. I don't know, but the rates the rates that they were offering, I didn't think it was worth my. I didn't think it was worth my time. Um,
It
uh,
probably isn't.
I see a lot, and I don't. So I can't speak with any authority. As I see a lot of people hauling Amazon,
Yeah.
but I also see I have several of those fulfillment centers that are not. Speckled throughout, not far from where I live, and I see a lot of times I see a lot of trucks just sitting. A lot of bobtail trucks at their fulfillment center city, just sitting there sitting, and I mean, I don't know if they're taking the breaks or what they're doing, but it doesn't seem to be the most productive use of time. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're better off if you're servicing an account like that, unless they're paying you by the hour and you're getting paid to sit. I think you're better off on a hook and drop basis.
Yeah, but
You
see,
know?
that's the thing. I think that they're sitting waiting on when they're bringing in whatever they're bringing in. I think they're sitting waiting on to be repowered or whatever, waiting on uh, freight to move again or whatever. So I don't know, but yeah, I definitely see. No matter which one I go by, I mean the entrance way into the fulfillment centers are just lined with bobtails, just sitting there waiting
Yeah.
to get loaded. I don't know, but I know that there are a few companies that are offering that. A lot of major companies are also offering power only to pull their freight as well. I know JB
Okay,
Hunt.
so you know now I was talking to. I have a friend of mine, Ronnie, and I'm trying to get him on the show. He's a little bit apprehensive. He's kind of a private guy, very fascinating man. Uh, Dropped out of school in grade 10 or something. Came from a very affluent family. His father was, I think his father was an accountant by profession, but owned I think his father owned a small beer distributorship. And he quit school at 16, bought a truck, didn't even know how to drive it, hired his buddy's father, who was a truck driver, to drive for him, who showed him how to drive. And he's driving a tractor trailer around New York and New Jersey and then running interstate at 16 years old. Back in the day, this would have been back in the early 60s or mid 60s, and built a fleet of 300
Wow.
tractors and probably 600 trailers, mostly hauled alcohol, and built a huge business during a different era. He built a business during regulatory times. This is prior to 1980, where he developed this big business, and he ended up being very fortunate. 27 years ago, he was offered, one of his competitors, a public company, wanted to buy him, and he told them to get lost, and they kept calling him, and he actually called his lawyer, and his lawyer said, "What are you, an idiot? Speak to them." And he did, and he ended up selling his business to them. But he was always able to work on an 80% operating ratio, 20% profit. And he has a hard time when he's reading, and he's very, very involved in the industry still, as far as he is well read. He knows every stock, he knows every company. He even owns he's just taking delivery of a 2025 Peterbilt that he drives with a stainless steel trailer, but never puts freight in it. It's just because he can, okay? Uh,
Riding pretty.
yeah. And he actually bought this one with an automatic transmission because he's 75 years old now.
riding pretty, as they say, sitting cool on his stool.
You got it. That's him. But and we just talked this morning, as a matter of fact, about the shape of the industry and what Ronnie says all the time. He says you cannot like volume equals vanity. You can't when you're losing money per mile, running more miles is only going to make you lose more money.
You know, that's it's funny you say that. Let's maybe tap into that just a little bit, Chuck. Let's talk about that for a second,
Okay.
because a lot of times people think that they think that, well, I can make up on volume what I miss on, and I've always had that conundrum as well. It's always been something that's in my head is shoot, I'd rather run less miles for more money than to run more miles for less money.
Well, of course.
And and some people like, well, by the end of the week, I'll be making X amount, while we'll end up at the same. We'll end up very near. They may be a little bit ahead, but at the end, if we're comparing notes on an apples to apples basis, by the end of the day, total dollar wise, we're looking at maybe around the same amount of money, but I've got way less miles invested than they do.
And you bought way less fuel,
right?
Way less wear and tear on your truck, way less miles on your truck. You're ahead.
Because they're saying that the industry average for running a truck is about 110,000 miles a year.
Yeah,
I've got to be honest. For the past 6, 7, 8 years, I think I was really hustling if I did over 80,000 miles a year.
Yeah, on a truck lasts you, and then you get these guys that have this bright idea. They're going to get their brother-in-law or their wife or whatever. They're going to run team to California, from New York to California, and they're just going to make a fortune. Well, you're going to get paid. You can do 5,000 miles a week, so you're going to do 300,000 miles a year if you do it consistently. And in 3 years, just over 3 years, your truck's got 1 million miles. If you haven't paid for it yet, you better hope you did, because it's not worth anything. A 1 million mile truck is worth nothing these days.
Yeah.
That's the danger. When I was a kid, I was 21 years old, and it was real slow right after Christmas. And for a short period of time, I worked for a transport company, a legitimate transport company. And they said to me one day, "Do you want to do some city work?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." So they put me in the city, and the second day or so, I ended up at loading this load, and it took 3 days to unload. And everybody said, "Well, why would you want to go to that place?" And I said, "I'll go there all the time." The dispatcher was shocked. He said, "Why would you like to go there? Why do you like it?" I said, "Because I have no expenses. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a secret. I never even moved my truck. I left it there and took a taxi home." I figured out it was cheaper to take a taxi home and take a taxi back there at 7 a.m. than it was to run my truck back home or to the yard.
Yeah.
So I loved going, and it was a hand bomb. Well, I'm 21 years old, and the place was so backwards. They would bring you a pallet, and you would stack the plastic boxes on the pallet, and the guy with the tow motor would come back an hour and a half later and bring you another pallet. So it took these idiots 3 days, and that's why I love to go to this company called Fireco. It was just the best, and I could make money. And all these other guys would say, "We hate going to that place. It's so boring." And I go, "I'll go there all the
time." Find the niche.
Yeah, and I'd get 10 hours a day. In those days, I think we were getting $10.25 an hour with our own truck. Okay. But that's like 50 years ago.
Right.
That was like $50 or $60 an hour for hand bombing. I was making good money. $100 a day, $500 a week, and no fuel. I'd do that all the time.
So Chuck, I think we scared the hell out of everybody. I hope we haven't, but
Well,
we've been talking about and it's like I said, it's not an intention of trying to put fear or doom and gloom or anything, but just trying to be. I pride ourselves on trying to be realists.
we are.
Trying to actually talk about this industry from a real perspective, from a boots on the ground, um, everyday perspective, and not pie in the sky, not sunshine pumpers, not telling you can get out here and make $1 million with a box truck. Um, some of the crazy stuff that's floating around out on social media.
Oh my
But
God.
I would like to try if there's any how let's see if we can find a silver lining for everybody to kind of end everything on a somewhat of an uptick note. I try to see if there's anywhere positive that we might be able to.
Well, there is, Rico. You know what? First of all, I still do believe the where there is money to be made, do the work the other guys don't want to do. Okay. And a lot of times people want to get out there and do miles. They want to go from, they want to go from San Francisco to Chicago or New York or whatever. They want those miles.
Right.
Um, Stay close to home. And if you can't stay close to home, at least we've been saying it all along. People did not listen to us, okay? Or a lot of people didn't listen to us. I know that some did, and the ones that did fared better. Even some of the best operators that we know that ran steady lanes, kept their costs down, did everything right. They're having a difficult time too, just because freight volumes are down, and because freight volumes are down, freight rates are down. Okay, so it goes lockstep. But still, try to find the work that nobody else wants to do, the local work. I would suggest stay closer to home. We have a listener that does very, very well,
Yep.
runs about 100-mile radius of his home down by Charlotte and does very well. You don't have to run 4 states away. Keep it close because the industry still works like this, where freight rates are they're higher. Freight rates are much higher per mile on shorter trips,
Right.
and trucks do not have brains. They don't know if they're going to California or they're going next door. They're still going to get whatever mileage you get. You get 6 miles per gallon. You get 8 miles per gallon. Still going to get 8 miles a gallon. Insurance is still going to cost the same, but you're not putting the wear and tear in your truck. You're not using the fuel,
Right. Right.
and you get more per mile. So those are the bright spots. When we had Dean Croak on, I think it was last week. Dean always has a bright spot for us. Do you notice every single time? He's always, and I thought to myself, geez, he's pretty optimistic. He's a lot more optimistic than,
Yeah.
well, sometimes he's right. Okay. That there is a bit of a bump. But last week when he was on, he had nothing good to say. It was the first time ever that Dean had nothing. And I think we're being realists. I think we've always been realists. We don't candy coat or sugar coat
Right.
anything for our listeners. We are giving them the actual truth. The best thing you can do is you have to watch your expenses. If you're running 5 trucks, you're losing money, maybe cut it down to 1 truck. It's going to hurt, but you're going to lose less. Okay. This will come back. I don't know when. Nobody knows when. It could be very well. We could be into this for another 3 years. We just came off the longest good time we ever had. We've never had good times like we did post-COVID. The rates were we had a good, solid, what would you say, 20 months, 24 months?
Yeah, and I seen another story too, Chuck. And I think that from a regulatory standpoint, just before we get ready to get out of here, I seen another story I meant to bring up a little earlier. There are companies out there. I don't know how, I got a lot of pushback on this years ago when this very first came into effect, when the ELDs first came into effect, because I was of the mindset saying that, hey, it's going to be a good thing. it's going to be beneficial for us because now it's going to be very difficult for um, to push the line on hours of service, and also it'll be a little bit easier for you to be able to prove detention because your equipment's being satellite tracked at all times, so on and so forth. That didn't necessarily, and I'll readily admit that didn't necessarily come to pass initially. Initially, when the ELDs first came in, yet rates skyrocketed like crazy, and they quickly came right back down. But there are companies out here now, from a couple of stories that I read. There are certain companies out here, and I hope that there's some teeth behind getting cracked down on some of these companies that are offering services to be able to go in to edit your ELDs to where they can't even see it on the regulatory side when you email them in for compliance. That they can't even see how because generally you've always been able to edit the ELD, but there's always been some type of breadcrumb or something left into the log to show that it actually was done. And now that they're and so it's gotten at a bad level. I haven't heard of it, but it's got to be pretty bad when reporters of certain industries, certain publications can call, and the people that they talk to on the sales side will tell them, "Oh yeah, there wouldn't be a problem for us to create more hours for you."
Rico, I want you to think about this for a second, what this opens up. So a carrier is usually going to do this because they're going to be having an audit, okay? And they're having an audit because they were usually involved in a crash. Because these days, the only way you're having an audit is you've had a crash or you got a real bad safety, like real bad. You're a bad operator. If it's a crash and if there was somebody injured or somebody, God forbid, killed, and you hired these people and you brought them in, now you've gone down a real slippery slope because I'm not a lawyer, but I would think you just tampered with evidence.
Yeah, and it's way too much technology out here. You may be able to skirt one aspect of the technology, but I mean, you got a cell phone, people, and most people are keeping their cell phone on, and that cell phone is pinging tower to tower all the time, and they know exactly where within within a couple of 100 feet of where you were at a given point in time. All they have to do with it, and all of that, there's no editing cell phone tower information. And if you get caught into a conundrum where if there's an accident and the fatality, best believe plaintiff's bar is going to be getting all of that information, and that's one way that they're definitely going to keep trying to bust us over the head with these nuclear verdicts.
You know what? And it's not just the nuclear verdict, because to some of the people out there, they couldn't care if they got a nuclear verdict because they have less than nothing. Okay.
Right.
But now all of a sudden you're involved in criminal activity. Do you really want to is there enough money in hauling cheap freight to go to jail?
Yeah.
Like, come on, guys. This is like years ago. I admit we did all sorts of stuff, with logbooks when I first got in, and we did all that. And I'm not proud of it, but it was the times. All right. And then we learned that you can't scale a business that way. And then you learned that Big Brother is watching you all the time. So you can't do this stuff anymore. It's going to get you in trouble. It will bite you in the backside. They have 100 ways of finding out. They had 40 ways of finding out what you did 30 years ago. Because I remember it was about 30 odd years ago, my first audit. And this is over 30 years ago, when the officer came in from the DOT.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, they used to send officers from Buffalo to audit us. They would come in the day before they came in. They'd say, get these files ready for these drivers, these trucks. Why they wanted those drivers and those trucks is because those guys and girls had driven over scales. And they wanted to make sure what has been going on for decades. Every time a truck went over a plate, they took their picture. Okay. And they wanted to make sure that those drivers and those trucks, if they went over the Illinois state line scale at 6:14 p.m., that their logbook said that. And that's how they got you. Okay. And I learned real fast. You can't, you can run, but you can't hide. So don't
Right.
do it. And that's when all of a sudden the light went off, and I said, we can't do this is over. We
Right.
got to run legitimate, and we did. And I think running crazy now is pretty dangerous.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, Chuck, I didn't think that we were actually going to be able to pull off a full hour today, but I'll tell you what, we would.
It's about did it, brother. We had a lot.
Here we are.
A lot to talk about, and there's still a lot to talk about.
Yes.
They only give us an hour on this slot, and we could go on forever. This has been great, Rico. I've enjoyed just hanging out, just you and me, like the old days.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely, definitely. So before we get ready to wrap it up, I want to go ahead and let everyone know, like I say, we may not have a bunch of good news, but we might be able to give some type of sage advice. So how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, and if I can help anybody, whether you're thinking of starting, getting into it, or you're into it and you're over your head, I'm more than happy to help you. I mentor several people, and I'm glad to add you to the list. I don't charge anything for it. Send me an email, chucksnow280@outlook.com. Put your phone number on it. I will get back to you, and I'll see how we can help you. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back. We're in the hole for another week.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, once again, we appreciate you guys for taking the time out to hang with us. We know that you could have been anywhere else in the world. Hopefully, you got some value from today's conversation. If you know anyone that could benefit from hearing this type of information, please send them, share the show with them, like, share, comment, subscribe. That helps us out tremendously. I think there's a button somewhere over here or maybe up there. Hit the subscribe button. I'm not sure exactly where they place it at, but hit the subscribe button for us. It helps us out tremendously. And with that being said, we want you guys to continue to stay safe out there, stay healthy, stay profitable. Keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. God willing, we'll talk at the same time, same place next week.
Catch you on the flip flop.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you and good night.
God bless.